He bought his family a mansion, but they credited his brother his explosive revenge. Shocked everyone. Roots of discord. I've been tending gardens for California's elite for years, from the manicured lawns, taxes, to the cliffside estates of Malibu. You see a lot when you're the guy with dirt on his hands and clippers in his pocket, things the rich don't expect you to notice. They talk freely, assuming I'm just part of the scenery, but I'm not deaf, and I'm not blind. A former Marine doesn't miss much. The story I'm about to tell you is one I pieced together working for the Hawthorne family, a clan so tangled in their own wealth and secrets, it's a wonder their roses still bloom. It's about two brothers, Xander and Zander, and a family that's more thorn than flower. I first met the Hawthornes when I took on their estate in Palo Alto, a sprawling mansion with fountains that cost more than my truck and hedges. So precise you'd think they were carved with a laser. Esther Hawthorne, the matriarch, was in her 70s, sharp as a tack and twice as prickly. She'd glide through the garden in her designer scarves, barking orders at the staff while her husband, York, trailed behind, muttering apologies. York was a retired real estate tycoon, but you'd never know it from his slumped shoulders and nervous glances. Their sons, Xander and Zander, were as different as drought and deluge. Xander, the eldest, at 45, had a smile that could sell sand in the desert, but his eyes were always darting, like he was waiting for the next deal to crash. Xander, 10 years younger, was quieter, with an intensity that made you think he was calculating your net worth just by looking at you. I was pruning the azaleas one spring morning when I first caught wind of the trouble brewing. Esther was on the patio, sipping coffee with Bennett, the family's slick attorney, who always smelled like overpriced cologne. My niece, Indy, was with me that day, helping out while she worked on her landscape design degree. She's 25, smart as hell, with a chip on her shoulder from a past she doesn't talk about much. Her mother, my sister, died years ago in a mess tied to some rich family's dirty money. Indy's got a nose for secrets and a knack for finding trouble, which makes her both a help and a headache. Xander's our star, Esther was saying, her voice carrying over the hum of my clippers. Always has been. Xander's, well, he's the spare, isn't he? Good with numbers, but no vision. Bennett chuckled, scribbling something on a notepad. I kept my head down, but Indy froze, her shears hovering over a rose bush. She's got a thing about fairness, probably because life hasn't been fair to her. I shot her a look. Keep working, kid, but I knew she was listening. See, Xander had just come back to California after making a name for himself in Silicon Valley. Word was he'd built a fortune in venture capital, the kind of money that buys private jets and politicians. He'd bought his parents a new mansion in Beverly Hills, a single-story beauty with wide doorways, designer's doorways, and a garden I'd kill to design. It was a peace offering, or maybe a plea for their approval. Xander, on the other hand, was living in the old Palo Alto house with his wife Fiona and their son Adrian. Fiona was a former model, all cheekbones and ambition, but their bank account was as dry as a summer creek. Xander's string of failed startups had bled the family's savings, and Esther and York were footing the bill for everything. Rent, private schools, even Fiona's designer handbags. I'd see Xander strutting around the estate, talking big about his next game changer, while Fiona scrolled Instagram, planning parties they couldn't afford. Adrian, their 30-year-old son, was different. He'd roll up in a beat-up Jeep, tattoos peeking out from his sleeves, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. He'd nod at me sometimes, the only one in the family who seemed to notice I existed. Nice work on the hedges, he'd say, and I'd grunt back, because Marines don't chat much. Indy, though, got along with him. They'd talk about music or art while she sketched garden layouts, and I'd keep an eye on her, knowing she was too curious for her own good. The real spark came a few weeks later when I was working at the Hawthornes Malibu property, a cliffside estate owned by Esther's sister, Georgia. Georgia was the odd one out, a philanthropist who'd cut ties with the family years ago and lived like a recluse. She'd passed away recently, and the place was being prepped for sale. Indy was with me, sketching ideas for a buyer's open house. We were in the garden, surrounded by wild lavender and sea air, when she found something buried under a stone bench. A small metal box, rusted but intact. Inside were papers, including a letter from Georgia to Xander. Listen to this, Indy whispered, her eyes wide. To my nephew Xander, I leave my Malibu home and $2 million. You've got the heart this family lacks. Don't let them break you. I told her to put it back, but she was already snapping photos with her phone. This is big, she said. Why would Georgia skip Xander? And why is this hidden? I didn't have answers, but I knew trouble when I saw it. Georgia's will was the talk of the family, and Esther wasn't happy. I'd overheard her arguing with Bennett by the pool the day before. Georgia had no right, she'd hissed. Xander doesn't deserve it. Xander's the one who needs it. Bennett had murmured something about legal options, and I'd clipped a hedge a little too hard, knowing that kind of talk meant lawsuits or worse. Back at the Palo Alto estate, I saw Xander for the first time since he'd bought the Beverly Hills place. He was in a tailored suit, but his jaw was tight, like he was holding back a storm. He'd come to tell his parents about the new house, hoping for a pat on the back. I was mulching the flower beds when he stepped onto the patio, a folder in hand. "It's done," he said. "The Beverly Hills house is yours. No stairs, big garden, everything you wanted." Esther barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice, dear. But Xander's been so busy with his new project. He's got a meeting with Cameron next week, big investor. You remember Cameron, don't you?" York nodded along, sipping his scotch, while Xander stood there, the folder creasing in his grip. I kept my head down, but Indy was watching from the rose garden, her lips pressed tight. She's got a soft spot for underdogs, and Xander was shaping up to be one. Xander showed up an hour later, all charm and bluster, with Fiona trailing behind in heels that sank into the lawn. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe this," he said, grinning. "Cameron's in. We're talking millions." Esther lit up, hugging him like he'd just cured cancer. Fiona smirked, tossing her hair, while Xander watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. Adrian slunk in behind them, headphones on, avoiding everyone. He caught Indy's eye and gave her a half smile, but she was too busy glaring at Fiona to notice. That night, I was locking up the tool shed when Indy pulled me aside. "I heard something," she said, her voice low. Esther was on the phone with Bennett. She said George's will is a problem, but they've got a plan. Something about Xander moving into the new house. Her eyes were bright, too bright, like she was itching to dig deeper. I grabbed her arm. "Stay out of it," I said. "These people play dirty." She yanked free, her jaw set. "I'm not scared. Someone's got to call them out." I didn't sleep much that night. I've seen what money does to families, turns love into leverage, trust into transactions. The Hawthornes were headed for a reckoning, and Indy was too close to the fire. I'd lost my sister to people like them, and I wasn't about to lose my niece. But as I drove to the estate the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that the roots of this discord were deeper than I knew, and the storm was just beginning. Blossoming intrigue. The Hawthorne family's drama was like a weed you can't pull out, deep roots, spreading fast. I've seen plenty of rich folks' secrets in my years tending their gardens, but this one was different. It wasn't just money or pride at stake. It was blood, loyalty, and a past that wouldn't stay buried. By summer, the Palo Alto estate was buzzing with tension, and my niece Indy was digging into things she shouldn't. I'm no stranger to trouble. Marines don't flinch, but watching her poke at the Hawthorne hornet's nest made my gut twist. I knew the signs of a storm coming, and it was going to be a bad one. Zander had finalized the Beverly Hills mansion for his parents, a sleek ranch-style place with a garden I'd been hired to shape into a showpiece. Esther and York were thrilled, or so they said, but their gratitude was as thin as drought-seasoned soil. I was laying out flower beds when I overheard Esther on the phone, planning a housewarming party. "Xander's the one who made this happen," she told someone, her voice dripping with pride. "He's got vision. Xander just writes checks." I glanced at Indy, who was sketching arbors nearby, her pencil pausing mid-stroke. She didn't say anything, but her eyes narrowed. She'd heard it too. Xander and Fiona were already acting like the new house was theirs. I'd see them driving up in a borrowed Bentley, Fiona snapping photos of the property for her Instagram, captioning it, "Our fresh start." Their son, Adrian, wasn't buying it. He'd hang out in the garden while I worked, kicking at the dirt, muttering about how his parents were leeches. He and Indy had started talking more, bonding over their shared disdain for the family's games. "They think I'm going to live in their dream house," Adrian told her one day, tossing a pebble into a fountain. "I'd rather sleep in my Jeep." Indy grinned, sketching a rose. "Then do it. Screw their plans." Meanwhile, Indy's discovery at George's Malibu estate was burning a hole in her pocket. That rusty box she'd found, the one with George's letter leaving Xander the house and $2 million, had more than just a will. There were letters, old ones, hinting at a debt Esther owed Georgia, something about $5 million, funneled into Xander's first startup back in the 90s. The startup tanked, but the money was never repaid. Indy showed me the photos she'd taken, her voice low, as we sat in my truck after work. "This isn't just about Xander's inheritance," she said. Esther stole from her own sister, and Bennett knows. I told her to drop it, but her jaw was set, same stubborn look her mom used to get. Someone's got to make this right, she said. I didn't argue. I knew she wouldn't listen. Xander, oblivious to the letters, was still trying to win his parents' approval. He'd show up at the Palo Alto house with updates on the Beverly Hills property, only to be brushed off. One afternoon, I was trimming hedges when he cornered York by the pool. The garden's almost done, Xander said, handing him a folder of designs. Indy's got a real eye for it. York barely glanced at the pages. Xander's got a big pitch with Cameron tomorrow, he said, like it was an answer. That's what matters. Xander's face tightened, but he just nodded and walked away. I caught Indy watching from the garden, her sketch pad clenched a little too hard. Cameron, Xander's investor buddy, was a new player in this mess. He was all flash. Rolex, private jet, the kind of guy who'd sell you a bridge and make you thank him. Xander was banking on him to fund his latest startup, some AI nonsense that sounded like a pipe dream. I overheard them at the estate one evening, Xander pacing the patio while Cameron swirled a whiskey. This is it, man, Xander said. Millions. I'll pay Mom and Dad back. Get Fiona off my back, Cameron smirked. You'd better. I don't back losers. Fiona, lounging nearby, didn't look convinced. Neither did I. Then there was Jewel, York's old business partner, who showed up like a snake in the grass. I was at the Malibu property, clearing overgrowth, when she pulled up in a vintage Jaguar. She was in her 60s, all sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, and she didn't waste time. Tell York I'm back, she said, like I was her secretary. He owes me. I grunted, kept working, but Indy was listening from the lavender patch. Later, she told me Jewel had been cut out of a real estate deal years ago, one that made York rich. She's got dirt, Indy said, excited. Maybe on Esther, too. I told her to stay clear, but I could see the wheels turning. Indy's next move was reckless, even for her. She'd been working on the Beverly Hills garden, designing floral arches for the housewarming. When she slipped into the Palo Alto study during a lunch break, she'd overheard Bennett mention a safe in George's old office, and she couldn't resist. She found it behind a painting, old school, like something out of a movie, and cracked it with a code from one of George's letters. Inside were more documents, bank transfers, emails, proof that Esther had forged George's signature to siphon the $5 million. Indy snapped photos, her hands shaking, and sent them to Xander anonymously using a burner email. I'm not getting caught, she told me later when I grilled her, but he deserves to know. Xander, with help from Harmony, his lawyer friend, started digging into George's will. Harmony was sharp, no nonsense, the kind of woman who could smell a lie from a mile away. They met at a coffee shop in Palo Alto, and I happened to be nearby, grabbing a sandwich. Through the window, I saw Xander show her Indy's photos. Harmony's eyes widened, then narrowed. This changes everything, she said, loud enough for me to hear as I passed. If Esther forged documents, the whole will could be contested. Xander looked grim. I just wanted their respect, he said, not a war. Back at the estate, Xander's plans were unraveling. Cameron's deal came with strings, shady investors, offshore accounts, the kind of stuff that lands you in federal court. Fiona was pushing him to sign, desperate for the cash, but Adrian overheard and confronted his dad in the garden. You're gonna tank us again, Adrian said, his voice carrying to where I was planting tulips. Xander laughed it off. You'll thank me when you're rich. Adrian stormed off, nearly knocking over Indy's wheelbarrow. She steadied it, then caught his arm. You don't have to stay, she said. You're not them. He looked at her like she'd handed him a lifeline. Jewel made her move a week later, showing up at the Palo Alto house during a family dinner. I was outside, checking sprinklers, when I heard raised voices. Jewel stood in the dining room, holding a folder. You screwed me out of millions, York, she said, and Esther helped. I've got proof. Esther's face went white, but she recovered fast. Get out, or I'll call security, Jewel smirked. Tell Bennett to call me. We'll talk. She left, but not before slipping a note to Indy, who'd been setting up floral centerpieces. Indy read it later, her eyes wide. She knows about the $5 million, she whispered to me, and she thinks Cameron's involved. The housewarming party was set for the next weekend, and Esther was in full queen bee mode, inviting half of California's elite. I was hired to oversee the garden setup, which meant Indy was there too, weaving roses into arches that cost more than her tuition. She overheard Esther and Fiona planning to announce Xander as the mastermind behind the new house, with no mention of Xander. They're moving in, Indy told me, furious. Xander, Fiona, the whole crew. Like Xander doesn't exist. I told her to keep her head down, but she was already texting Xander, warning him. I was raking gravel the night before the party when Indy pulled me aside. I told Jewel about the safe, she said, her voice barely a whisper. She's coming tomorrow, with proof. My heart sank. You're playing with fire, I said. These people don't forgive. She shrugged, but her eyes were scared. I lost Mom because of people like them. I'm not backing down. I've seen wars, real ones, with blood and bullets. But this, money, lies, family, was its own kind of battlefield. Indy was in deep, Xander was on the edge, and the Hawthornes were about to learn that secrets don't stay buried. As I locked up the tool shed, I thought about my sister, how she'd trusted the wrong people and paid the price. The party was tomorrow, and I had a bad feeling it'd be more than flowers getting crushed. Fruits of betrayal? The Beverly Hills mansion shimmered under a velvet sky, its garden a cathedral of Indy's roses and my calloused hands. Fairy lights wove through the arches, casting a glow that hid the rot beneath the Hawthorne family's polished surface. Laughter and clinking glasses spilled from the windows, but this housewarming party was a grenade with the pin half pulled. I've seen carnage in war zones, but the kind brewing here, money, lies, and blood ties twisted into knots, was its own kind of brutal. My niece Indy was in the thick of it, her courage outpacing her caution, and as a former Marine, I knew the cost of stepping into a fight like this. Trouble wasn't just coming, it was already here, wearing a silk gown and a fake smile. I was in the garden, tweaking a sprinkler head, when the party hit full swing. Esther Hawthorne, draped in pearls and a sapphire dress, played queen at the entrance, her voice honeyed as she welcomed California's elite. Our dream home, she cooed, gesturing to the mansion like she'd laid a single brick. York, her husband, hovered behind, his tie crooked, nodding at her every word. Zander, their golden son, worked the crowd with a grin that could sell ice to penguins, while Fiona, his wife, floated beside him, her diamond earrings catching the light. Their son, Adrian, leaned against the bar, nursing a beer, his tattoos peeking out like a quiet rebellion. Indy was nearby, adjusting a rose trellis, but her eyes kept flicking to the house. She'd warned Xander about Esther's plan to paint Xander as the hero of this house he didn't buy. She'd also tipped off Jewel, York's old business partner, who was lurking somewhere in the shadows. I'd told Indy to back off, but her mother, my sister, had that same stubborn streak, and it got her killed. Indy wasn't listening, and I was starting to wonder if I could protect her from this mess. Inside, the mansion was a spectacle. Chandeliers blazing, caterers weaving through with trays of lobster and champagne, a string quartet sawing away at Vivaldi. I caught Esther's speech as I raked gravel near the patio, her voice carrying over the buzz. After years of sacrifice, she said, raising a glass, we've earned this home. And Xander, our visionary, made it happen. The crowd applauded, Fiona preening, Xander soaking it up like he'd signed the deed. Someone asked about Xander, the younger son, and Esther's smile tightened. He's too focused on his career to bother with family, she said, her tone slicing. I glanced at Indy, who was clutching her shears, her knuckles white. She'd sent Xander proof from George's safe bank transfers, forged signatures showing Esther stole $5 million from her sister to prop up Xander's failed startup. Indy was a lit fuse, and I could feel the explosion coming. Xander rolled up just as the party peaked. I was by the side gate, fixing a flickering light when his Tesla glided in. He stepped out, suit sharp, eyes like a gathering storm. Harmony, his lawyer friend, was with him, her briefcase stuffed with documents. Indy spotted them and darted over, whispering something that made Xander's jaw clench. Stay nearby, he told her, then strode toward the house with Harmony. Indy turned to me, her face a mix of fear and fire. It's going down, she said. I didn't answer. I'd seen men walk into ambushes with that same look, and it rarely ended clean. The air shifted when Xander entered the living room, Harmony at his flank. I slipped in behind, sticking to the shadows near the French doors. Esther was mid-toast, praising Xander's generosity, when Xander's voice cut through like a blade. Funny thing about this house, he said, loud enough to hush the quartet. You're throwing a party for it, but forgot to invite the guy who paid for every square foot. The crowd froze, glasses halfway to lips. Esther's smile wobbled. Xander tried to laugh it off, stepping forward. Xander, come on, don't make a scene. Grab a drink. But Xander wasn't here for games. He held up the deed, his hands steady as steel. This house is mine. I never transferred it. Not to you, not to anyone. Fiona's champagne flute hit the floor, shattering into 100 pieces. York sputtered, "Son, let's discuss this." But Xander kept going, his eyes locked on Xander. "You let Mom spin this fairy tale," he said. "You didn't pay a dime, but you're already unpacking your bags." Esther moved in, her voice cold as marble. "You're humiliating yourself, Xander. This is a family matter." That's when Indy snapped. She'd been hovering by the doorway, but now she stepped forward, holding her phone like a weapon. "It's not just the house," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "Esther stole $5 million from Georgia to bankroll Xander's flop. Forged her signature. I've got the bank transfers, emails, everything." The room detonated. Guests whispered, pulling out phones to record. Bennett, the family's oily lawyer, edged toward the exit, but Harmony blocked him, her eyes like daggers. "Not so fast," she said, waving her folder. "We've got copies. Every transaction. Every lie." Xander's charm collapsed, his face ashen. Fiona clutched his arm, hissing, "Fix this." But the real blow came from Jewel, who'd slipped in during the chaos, thanks to Indy's tip. She stood by the fireplace, holding a stack of papers, her smile venomous. "Esther didn't just rob Georgia," she said. "She and York hid millions in a tax scam with our real estate deal. I've got the ledgers, and the IRS is very interested." She tossed a USB drive onto the coffee table, where it landed with a soft clink that echoed like a gunshot. Adrian, who'd been silent at the bar, pushed through the crowd. His voice was low but carried. "I'm done," he said, glaring at his parents. "You've lied to me my whole life. About money, about everything." He turned to Xander, his shoulders squared. "You're the only one who's been real. Help me get out of this." The guests parted as Adrian crossed to Xander's side, leaving Xander and Fiona stranded. Esther's composure cracked, her voice a screech. "Xander, you're tearing this family apart. We're your blood." Xander's gaze was ice. "Blood doesn't forge signatures or steal from its own." I stayed by the doors, watching the wreckage unfold. Indy's hands shook, but she held her ground, her proof the spark that set it all ablaze. I wanted to yank her out, shield her from the fallout, but she'd chosen her hill to die on. I thought of my sister, how she'd trusted rich folks and got crushed. Indy was different, she was fighting, and damn, if I wasn't proud, even if it terrified me. Then Cameron, Xander's investor friend, tried to play peacemaker, his Rolex glinting as he raised his hands. "Let's all calm down," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Xander, you don't want this public. Think of the family name." But Indy wasn't having it. "You're in on it too," she said, pointing at him. "Those shady accounts in Xander's deal, your name's on them." Cameron's smile slipped, and for a second, I saw fear in his eyes. Jewel laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "She's right. I've got emails tying you to the offshore accounts. Want to talk to the feds?" Cameron backed off, muttering excuses, but the damage was done. Xander faced the crowd, his voice steady but final. "This party's over. This is my house, and I'm asking you to leave. Now." Guests scrambled, grabbing purses and plates, some still filming. Esther lunged at Xander, her nails clawing the air. "You'll pay for this. You ungrateful." Harmony stepped in, guiding her toward the door with a lawyer's calm. Xander made a last-ditch plea, his voice low. "Xander, think about Adrian. He needs stability." Xander glanced at Adrian, who nodded. "He'll have it," Xander said, "without your lies." As the mansion cleared, I helped Indy pack her tools, my chest tight. Esther, York, Xander, and Fiona piled into a car, their faces a mix of fury and humiliation. Adrian stayed behind, sitting on a garden bench, staring at the roses like they held answers. Indy sat beside him, quiet for the first time all night. You okay?" she asked. He shrugged. "Free, maybe, thanks to you." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I locked the shed, stepping over scattered glasses and abandoned napkins. The garden was still perfect, but the house felt like a tomb. Weeks later, word spread that Xander gave the Beverly Hills mansion to Adrian, setting him up with a trust to build his own life. He sold Georgia's Malibu estate, donating half the proceeds to a clean energy charity in her name, the other half to Harmony's legal startup, which was taking on corporate fraud cases. Esther, York, Xander, and Fiona moved into a 2-bedroom condo in the valley, their gilded world reduced to linoleum and shared walls. I was pruning hedges at a new job in Malibu when Indy showed me a text from Jewel. "Cameron's hiding more than money," it read. "Ask Adrian who his real father is." Indy's eyes sparked, but I grabbed her phone. "No more," I said. "You've done enough." She didn't fight me, but I saw her screenshot the text before handing it over. I caught glimpses of the aftermath. Xander and Harmony were spotted at a Palo Alto cafe, their hands brushing over coffee cups, maybe something more than colleagues now. Adrian opened a music studio in Santa Monica, and Indy's designing its rooftop garden, her sketches full of wildflowers. I'm back to my roses, my hands in the dirt, but Jules' text gnaws at me. Adrian's father? That's a secret even I didn't see coming. Indy's convinced there's more to dig up, and knowing her, she'll keep digging till she hits bedrock. Me, I just keep the gardens alive. But I've learned something in this mess. Money can buy mansions, but it can't silence the truth. The Hawthornes' roots run deep, and those thorns, they're sharper than ever. Thanks so much for watching. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments mean the world, and keep these stories coming.